I'm Nibali Rekla, and I'm 10 years old. I'm an author, speaker, and podcaster. And today on the show, we're talking about being creative and inspiring kids to do business. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Barron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Now, let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? What about facing your generational bias? What I mean by that is that you and I have a lot to learn, and maybe we could learn it from people who are also younger than us. Well, let's find out. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Radio, wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. You can also find us on ROKU TV across the United States, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, regular viewer, then big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that we work in the most diverse work environment of all time. But that diversity is not just cultural, it's many things, including generational. We're all a little tired of talking about millennials, particularly when we consider that the upper age of millennials will be 40 this year. So let me and you just stop for a moment and prepare ourselves for the next generation, which is Generation Z or Generation Z, or also known as the global generation. And if you have had direct access to understanding this coming generation, then you really want to understand them, then you will want to listen. Let's find out how you can. My guest on this episode is an author, is a podcaster, and she also appears on podcasts as a leading authority. In fact, I met her when we were both attending the New Media Summit in San Diego as media icons. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the real wunderkind, a 9-year-old entrepreneur and podcaster and author, Nibali Rekla. Hey, Niva, good to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
It is. I'm so great. I'm so glad for you to be here. So I want you to tell people, I just told them, but you tell them how old you are.
I'm 10.
You're 10 now.
Yep.
Like when I met you, you were a little bit younger. When did you become 10? When was your birthday?
It was September 22nd.
So you're just 10.
Yep.
Just became 10. That's very cool. So you and I met. We met in San Diego. We had this great conversation, and I just thought it was fabulous because you already have your own podcast. How long have you had your own podcast?
I've been doing it for 3 years.
3 years. So you started when you were 7.
Yep.
How did that happen? How did you start having a podcast at 7? That's craziness.
So I saw that my mom had a podcast, and it's a part of Superpower Experts. She is the one who started the entire thing, and I got really excited about it. And so I talked to her about it, and I said, can I start a podcast? And she went, well, no, I'm not coaching kids. And I said, I would be coaching them. And I said, I would want to call it Superpower Kids, and we could have a lot of fun talking. So then after a while, we planned it out, and boom.
Boom. That's fantastic. So you've interviewed lots of people now.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you talking about on the show? Let's just go there first.
Mostly about how they make a difference in the world and how kids can do the same. So I interview mostly adults, but I enjoy having kids on the show to talk about like showing the listeners that you can do something different and you can have fun and still have that playful childlike energy, and you can be an adult in business.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're going to talk about business and entrepreneurship in a moment, but so I want to talk to you about something that might be interesting for us to understand, because I think, as I said in the introduction, but when I was a kid, nobody listened to people who were 9 or 10 or 7 or 12 or 15 or maybe even 20, except maybe people of the same age. But now we are living in a very different time where social media lets people get online and show their voice. And we've had Greta, who has come up in the environmental issues, and she's out there and she's created a global movement. What's it like for you watching someone like her?
That's an interesting question. I would say it's different. I think it's cool seeing kids make a stand. Also, I enjoy seeing kids have a stand of respect for other people and talking as a community, a tribe, instead of like throwing problems at people. But I think it's interesting. I don't pay a whole lot of attention I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to social media lately, but I have the luxury of being the 10-year-olds, and so I don't really have to.
No.
And all it takes is a simple click, and I don't see it ever again. Mm-hmm. So I would say, again, it's interesting, but if I don't like it, I choose to not pay attention to it.
But what I'm talking about is not that. What I'm talking about is the fact that adults gathering. Greta was just in Vancouver, where I live. She was here last weekend. You know, she comes from Sweden. She was in New York. She spoke at the UN. And it's interesting to me that the world is listening, or potentially listening, and some are not reacting very well, but they are listening to children. And I just wonder if, I mean, obviously she's a big inspiration to a lot of adults. Do you see yourself as somebody who is and can be an inspiration to adults? And do you see the kids that you want to encourage as an inspiration to adults?
Yes, I would say that I have the chance to be. I can't speak for the adults that I've met, but I can say that I do make an impact in whether people react in a positive way or a not so positive way. I know that I serve my mission and it can impact people.
Why do you want to impact and influence adults as well as kids? Because obviously you want to impact other kids, but why adults?
For me, adults, especially parents, I realize that I don't know kids that well. Like, especially for parents, I don't know their kids. I haven't talked to them. I don't know them. So I realize that I'm going to need some help if I want to encourage this generation to start doing things that make our world something we want it to be. And so I want to talk to the parents and say, encourage your kids and don't bring them down. And even with adults, if they don't have kids, showing them that like we're all in the same world. We can be different ages, but we all have the same life and we all have the same area that we live in. And like we want to build it up to make it something that we're all in peace and harmony in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So you started out podcasting because your mom had a podcast, which I've been blessed to be on. And she was very kind and let me be a guest on there. But Was that the start for you? Was there something else that came and made you sort of transform into being an entrepreneur, not just a podcaster?
So I started business 8 years ago when I was 2.
8 years ago when you were 2.
Yes.
Come on.
So how I started was I saw that my parents had business cards because we started off at an event called CEO Space, and I still go there, and it's like my home, and I've grown up there, and that's kind of our family's start to business. And I saw that people had business cards and that they're like passing them around, and I went up to my parents, and this is in my book. I said, "Can I have business cards?"
At 2.
And
Okay.
my parents went no, and I went, "Why?" And at first the answer was, "Well, business cards are for adults." And then they realized, well, why not? So I got little cards with my face on them, and I had my name, and it had a few things I enjoyed doing. And a friend of ours at the time gave me a bag of Italian glass bracelets to sell, and I got to keep the profits, and that was my first business.
Very cool. And were you selling those bracelets at CEO Space?
I was.
That's very cool. So your first entrepreneurial endeavor was at 2 years old.
It was.
And who is not going to buy from some cute little 2-year-old? Right?
Exactly.
It's the perfect sales. Right? I'm now going to employ 2-year-olds to sell what I do. That's a great idea, Neva. That was fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
let's talk about that. Let's talk about kids being entrepreneurs, because your mom and dad didn't give you a traditional upbringing. You didn't go to a traditional school, and you have not looked at things in the same way because of that. So before we go into the entrepreneur part, let's just talk about when you're with other kids, what's that like? Do you notice there's a difference?
Sometimes, me being in business isn't the first thing I bring up.
No.
And in fact, it's probably the last thing I bring up, because I want to like get into a good relationship with somebody first before I just bring them into my entire life. I've had situations in the past where I've immediately talked about business, and this isn't stopping me from doing it again, but then that person continued to, like, since I'm in business, like, kind of put me on this pedestal, and like now I'm this serious entrepreneur, and I don't get to be a kid in their mind. And so I've had situations like that, but some people, I'll just like get into talking about it because it's my life, and they're like, "Wait, what? You have a business?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, go find me." And so I would say, yes, I notice a difference, but I like surrounding myself with the people who do similar things. My best friend has written a book and is writing another book, and she's in business. So I surround myself with the people who do as close to the things as I enjoy doing. And sometimes it just like the relationship works out, you know?
And is your best friend around the same age as you?
She's 12.
So she's 12. Yeah. She's writing her second book, and she's got a business too.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So like I said, so let's be clear here, because it's important for people to understand. You didn't go to traditional school, you're homeschooled, right? So tell us how you think that's made a difference to you, going out, being an entrepreneur, being a podcaster. How do you think it's made a difference?
I've gotten to spend more time on the things that I enjoy doing. I've gone to school in the past. Didn't last long.
Why is that?
The first school I went to, it just wasn't for me. And then we switched to a bilingual school, and it was kind of like training to go to prison. Um, because they made you put bubbles in your mouths, hands behind your back. You had to go to the bathroom, ring the bell, kids up against the door like this when their parents came to get them. I lasted a day and a half because on the second day, we sat in the car in the parking lot of the school with me crying for an hour. And that's when my parents went, no, you're not going here anymore. So I would say I get to spend more time with my parents and like my friends. And also I get to like build up the things I enjoy. And I still learn things. Like I don't learn it traditionally, but I go to business conferences and I help people. And so I get to learn, but in my way.
But you also get some traditional schooling from your mom,
Mm-hmm.
It's your mom, right? Who homeschools you mostly?
It's both of my
Both
parents. I'm also my teacher. So I have a curriculum that I can go to, and I have a book that I read all of the learning things on, and I also do a few courses.
What's your favorite subject?
Science. I love experiments.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What can you give me an example? You said you love experiments.
We order these kits, and it's basically like a bunch of different chemicals and stuff that you get to work with, and like we made like a carbon snake, and it like erupted out of this thing, and we made like colors transform and stuff. So we've done a lot.
That's very cool. I think I might want to go buy a carbon snake. For me. For me and my granddaughter to play together. Because my granddaughter is almost the same age as you. She's 9.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I'll maybe get her a carbon snake. So now let's talk about you. So first of all, we said, you went to CEO space, you sold your first things at 2, you made your profit. But for most kids, that would be like, oh, that's cool. I got some extra pocket money, and then that would be it, right? They go off and do something else. Why did you stay with entrepreneurial things, and how did you stay with entrepreneurial things?
That's a good question. I think one, just trusting, because being in business, especially as a child, has its ups and downs, because it's like when I go on stage, for example, it's challenging learning like what I'm going to talk about, as well as getting people to actually listen.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am still a kid, like I'm in this child body, and
yes, you are.
but I can have a stance of power, and I know what I talk about and all that, but sometimes it just goes off as like a little joke to people. And so I work on just like making myself as like powerful and nice as I can be in business. And I enjoy knowing that I can trust in the divine and in myself that it will work out, and just doing that. I don't really know how I do it though. It just kind of happens.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about some of the things you're involved in entrepreneurially now. I mean, aside from your book, we'll come to that in a minute.
My podcast, and I do speaking engagements. I'm also doing a book signing at our local Starbucks, which is going to be fun. And so we've invited quite a few people. And then besides that, it's mostly just promoting my book and stuff.
So when you're speaking, what are you speaking on?
I mostly speak about how kids can like change the world. My last talk was on how you can like raise inspirational young leaders, which is one of my favorite topics.
So tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please, because I think that's really important for our listeners and our viewers, because many of them will have children and have grandchildren, and I'm sure they would want to raise inspiring young people.
Mm-hmm. So an inspirational young leader is their kid doesn't have to be in business. And like as long as they're doing what they know their heart is telling them instead of like listening to their ego and their head, and also talking to the kids about like what do you think is possible and what can you do and what do you want to do, and do you want to do business, do you want to do something more traditional, and just finding, I call it like finding your sync, finding what you want to do and finding your path, if that makes sense.
So how would you, when you speak on stage, how do you recommend that a young person finds their sync, finds their path?
I would say listen to your heart and like just go with the flow, and learn that like when you're speaking on stage especially, that if you mess up, it's fine, just keep on going. I've messed up multiple times on stages, and I just laugh at myself because most of the time my parents are right up front and they can be like, no, and they'll let me know, and I just kind of go with the flow, and finding that as long as you are like being yourself and you're not trying to put on this face, this mask, knowing that people will listen, and it just takes time.
So what's the most fun thing for you to do?
I do a lot.
Sure.
I enjoy playing with my dog. She's one of my favorite things. I'm a swimmer, so I'm like part fish. I really enjoy swimming. I enjoy cooking. I make a bunch of weird meals. And
like what do you mean weird meals? What's that?
One of the ones I recently did for breakfast was I took this shrimp flavored ramen box and I made it with all the vegetables and stuff, and I mixed it in with eggs and peppers and cheese, and that was like our breakfast for the morning. And last night for dinner I did chicken with barbecue sauce and mayo on it.
Wow, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So now you've got a new book out. Tell us about your new book.
So I actually have it right here with me.
Yes.
So,
When Pigs Fly.
And it's the Parent's Guide to Inspire Your Young Entrepreneur. So I talk to parents about showing your kids what's possible and not putting them on this pedestal, and also like not talking badly about them, because like recently I've experienced parents maybe not talking the best about their children and behind their backs, so, and even in front of them. And so I'm teaching them that like words matter and that like your frequency matters, especially if you're raising this young person. What you do is what they're going to do in the future. And so talking to them about that, and then there's also little parts in the book that kids can read. Kids can also read the book by themselves, but there's little snippets like advice on if you're at a business conference, or maybe here's how to start a business, things like that.
So the book is written for parents to help them raise entrepreneurial, inspiring children. But if kids read it who are your age or maybe older, would they get as much out of it, or do you think it's more for the parents?
They would definitely get as much out of it. They would also learn, especially since kids don't really have kids, so they could learn treating others like that, and even their parents and the people around them, instead of raising a child.
Right. Now, your mom, your dad, you're all kind of Is it the right thing to say kind of spiritual? Is that the right word to use, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how that impacts and influences the way you do things and why you do the things you do?
So for me, like we call ourselves woo-woo. So it's spiritual. We listen to the divine, but we're also Christian. And so we use crystals. I have my pile over here. We talk to the divine and our higher selves, and learning, like we put frequency bubbles around ourselves. And so I also get visions, and so does my dad. So it's just a bunch of different things. So
why do you say, that's interesting that you say you're also Christian. Tell me about that part, because that's an interesting crossover.
Yeah, so it's doing it our own way and still believing in like what Christianity has to say. But for me, I mold it into, okay, that's what the church says. And I make it into, how do I incorporate this into my beliefs and into my life? And how do I incorporate it into my spirituality and being spiritual and believing in the divine and in God? And I kind of believe that they can kind of cross over and that I can talk to both.
So what inspires you, Neva?
People being kind, people speaking their truth. When adults listen to children, or people treat others as equals instead of like this mythical being. Because for me as well, I'm mostly the only kid at business conferences that we go to, because sometimes business conferences don't even allow kids.
No.
And so it's kind of odd because like when I walk into the room, all heads turn because what is this kid doing here? Or so it's nice when people treat me as an equal, and also knowing that I need to treat them the same. And I appreciate it when people just really speak their truth and they follow their path, and seeing them just going into their path and inspiring others and just being themselves and being authentic. So a lot inspires me.
I hear that. So talk to us about curiosity. What makes you, what is it? What do you think curiosity is, and do you think it's important or not important?
I would say it's very important because, like, most of the time, kids are very curious. Like, we can just
That's why I wanted to really ask you this, because I think you can answer this better than probably most adults.
Yeah, and so I would say it is important because it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to want to know things, and it's okay to not know things. And especially as a kid, we haven't been alive long enough to know a whole lot. And also, I want to go back to your point of what inspires me, little kids. And I say that, but I'm 10. But little kids inspire me because, like, they've been alive for this short amount of time, so they haven't experienced a whole lot in life. So they can just go up to someone and ask them a bunch of questions, give them a hug, and walk away. And they just are so energetic. So, and that goes back to being curious. And even for adults, having that curious energy and being able to learn things from it, as well as being able to just like think about, maybe since I'm curious, I can look into things a little bit more in depth because I have so many questions about it.
Right. Why do you think that adults stop being curious? Well, many adults, not all adults, but many adults.
I would say that there's a stereotype that once you reach like your later 20s, like now you're a full-on adult, and like you need to have this power energy, and like you need to be serious. And so I would say that it's mostly a stereotype, but also I would say that people just kind of forget, and who knows what happened in their past.
Mm-hmm.
So just like, I feel like maybe they just forget how to be a kid. And like the biggest compliment I can give someone is you remind me of a kid, because like kids are amazing and we don't really care what anybody else thinks. And so it is cool seeing adults who have that same energy and can play off as a serious role model for some people.
I think that's pretty great advice. We could all do with a bit more of that. What's something you learned recently that really inspired you or made you go, wow? Can you think of something that you learned recently?
Nothing's coming to my head, but I would say just like learning when people make a difference, and like, or I'll be on Facebook and I'll see someone who did something amazing for someone, and or just like seeing kind acts in real life and seeing people go up and help somebody or something like that. But
so all the way through here, you've talked about, and it's been this theme that's come up, which is around kindness, right? And yet you're also about entrepreneurship. So do you think that there's a way to make kindness into an entrepreneurial thing?
yes, very much so. Because there's some people in business who aren't transparent and they don't show people everything. And like, you don't have to. And when you're getting into business with somebody, it is important to know what they do. So like my parents, they do the Clear Business Directory, and they vet people and they see if they are who they say they are and they can do what they say they can do. Because there's a few people out there that lie about, it's like catfishing. They lie about their entire identity. And so when you finally get into business with them, it's like everything goes crazy and they just kind of drop you midair. And so I feel like being kind in business is one of the most important things. Because if you're not transparent in life, you're not transparent with others, and you're lying to them, you're basically lying to yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So is there something you like to do that, would you know what I mean if I said a guilty pleasure? Does that make sense?
Can you explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Because not everybody understands that statement. It's not because of your age. It's a lot of people don't. So guilty pleasure means it's something you really enjoy that you kind of shouldn't. You know, so for some people, they'll say dark chocolate. You know, for some people, they'll say a particular Netflix show or, you know, something like that. For some people, it's something else altogether.
So I have a few of those things then.
Good.
For me, it is dark chocolate.
Is it?
I enjoy really dark chocolate. Like 82 to 92 is my percentage. As well as just binge watching YouTube for a little bit. And I enjoy playing video games. So I would say that's about it. I also enjoy junk food, but I think everybody kind of enjoys junk food.
I don't.
So
when you binge watch YouTube, what do you watch?
I watch a lot. I watch reaction videos sometimes. So like the try not to say wow challenge or something. And then I like watching family YouTubers as well as like people making an impact. So yeah. And then I also play The Sims. That's a fun game.
Right. Yep. Very cool. Very cool. Show us your book again, please, Neva. I want everybody to make sure they see it as well. So When Pigs Fly, tell us the subline.
The Parent's Guide to Inspire Your Young Entrepreneur.
Right. So do you think there's an entrepreneur in every kid or not?
Yes, because like being an entrepreneur to me, like certainly means business, but also entrepreneurs get to experience something that most people don't, which is having the freedom to do what you want. Because as an entrepreneur, you're your own boss. So
Right.
you make your rules and you get to decide when you're going to work. So I would say yes. And not every kid wants to do business. It is a lot of work.
Sure.
But everybody has the freedom in their hearts, and everybody has the chance to do what they want. They just have, and obviously not hurting people, but they need to get to that point of like reaching that, and so like as a kid, like we may not have as many privileges as adults do, but we will certainly reach the point where we have the freedom to help others, and we have the freedom to do what we want, whether it be in business or a typical work job or whatever you can think of.
What do you imagine, and maybe you don't imagine, but let's see if you do. What do you imagine yourself to be like when you're 30?
I
Have you
don't.
thought about that?
I don't. It's that's one of the questions I get asked the most.
Mm-hmm.
But people have learned not to ask me that, so my response to that is I take baby steps and I'll see what it's like when I'm 30. And
Yeah.
as for right now, I want to keep on doing this. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the reason I asked it was because do you imagine that you'll still be doing something entrepreneurial, or do you think you'd like to work for somebody? Like, is there a job that you'd go, oh, that would be awesome? That's why I asked you.
Not really.
No?
I have always wanted, this is entrepreneurial, but I have always wanted to start like an animal shelter, but for like every type of animal. And so like it would start kind of small, but then I'd like reach a bunch of different animals, and I'd have a bunch of people working in it to help like crocodiles and giraffes and all that.
So kind of animal shelter zoo.
Yeah, like an animal hotel is what I would call it.
Animal hotel. I like that.
Yep.
That's entrepreneurial. You can drop off your giraffe and it'll stay the weekend at my hotel.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's great. So as we finish up here, Neva, what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to give our listeners, our viewers, a piece of advice, those particular ones who have children or maybe even have grandchildren. What would be the piece of advice you would want them to leave with that they could put into action as quickly as possible? What would that be?
I would say stay you, because that is the greatest gift you can give the world, is being fully authentic and being yourself. Because especially if you have kids and grandchildren, that's what they're going to want to look up to. And they're going to want to see you being yourself, and they're going to want to be able to bring that on into their life, because maybe they'll start being themselves and fully becoming who they are at a younger age. And so they can bring that on to so many more people.
Wonderful, Rick. It was just wonderful, Neva. I really enjoyed chatting with you. It was fun meeting you almost 2 years ago now. So it was really fun meeting you. And thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it. Before we go, I want you to tell people where they can get a hold of your book and where they can find out more about you and having you potentially come and speak for them. Where would they go to find out more about you?
So you can go to superpowerkids.com, and that will take you to buying my book and my podcast and everything. I'm also all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So you can find me almost everywhere. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, we'll make sure we post all those links in the show notes. And superpowerkids.com is the central place where you'll find everything. It's been fun having you here, Neva. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And I want to say thank you, and we'll see you in a little while. For you, dear listener, remember you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes by searching out our groups inside of LinkedIn and inside of Facebook by just looking for Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. You can find out how you can hire me, Dov Barron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization by simply going to fullmonty.com. fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the entrepreneur inside of your kids and your grandkids, and how you can possibly encourage that and get beyond your own restrictive thinking, your own bias about those younger generations. We got a lot to learn, and we can learn it from people who are much younger than us. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.